The Battle of Xicaowan was a 1522 naval battle during which the Ming Dynasty Imperial Navy defeated a Portuguese navy led by Martim Afonso. The battle was fought off the northwestern coast of Lantau Island, Hong Kong at a location called Xicaowan today. Causes: due to strained relations between China and Portugal, Martim Afonso de Melo set off from Malacca with 6 vessels on 10 July 1522 and arrived at Timau in August to conduct negotiations. Portuguese such as Xicaowan de Andrade had been kidnapping Chinese children to sell in Malacca, and ignoring Chinese sovereign authority at Timau, built a fort. Among the rumors spread was that Xicaowan and other Portuguese were cannibalizing Chinese children for food. The Chinese responded by blockading the Portuguese. The Portuguese wanted China to allow them to use Tunman as a base and to construct a fort there. The Portuguese had also conquered the Muslim Malay Malacca Sultanate at the capture of Malacca. The Sultanate was an ally of China, and China demanded that the Portuguese withdraw from Malacca and restore the Malay Sultan to the throne. The Chinese were notified of the Portuguese conquest of Malacca by the Sultan, and they were displeased about it. The Chinese held an entire Portuguese diplomatic mission hostage, with Perez as its leader, trying to force the Portuguese to return Malacca to the Sultan in exchange for Perez's release. This occurred in 1521. The Chinese effectively held the Portuguese embassy hostage, using them as a bargaining chip in demanding that the Portuguese restore the deposed Malaccan Sultan to his throne. The Chinese proceeded to execute several Portuguese by beating and strangling them, and torturing the rest. The other Portuguese prisoners were put into iron chains and kept in prison. The Chinese confiscated all Portuguese property and goods in the Perez embassy's possession. The Portuguese came up with a false explanation that they conquered Malacca due to the local rulers' tyrannies against the Chinese, which made the Chinese even more suspicious of the Portuguese. Xicaowan's activities, which were piratical in nature, angered the Chinese people and the Chinese government, which led to the Chinese officials to order the eviction of the Tunman Portuguese. The battle. The Chinese had expelled Xicaowan de Andrade and his Portuguese troops from Timau the year before. The Chinese went on the offensive against Martim, assuming he was there for the same purpose as Xicaowan. The Malay Sultan of Malacca also sent an ambassador to the Chinese, warning that the Portuguese had evil intentions. Muslim traders already present in Canton in China were hostile towards the Portuguese, wanting to keep their monopoly of trade with the Chinese. The Chinese destroyed one vessel by blowing up its gunpowder magazine, and captured another Portuguese ship. Martim Afonso was forced to escape back to Malacca, which he reached by October. During the battle, Chinese artillery destroyed the ship of the Portuguese captain Diogo de Melo, killing him. Yang San and Dai Ming assisted the Chinese commander Wang Hong in constructing artillery and firearms which were used to defeat the Portuguese. They had experience interacting with Portuguese before. The Chinese usage of cannons defeated the Portuguese forces. Aftermath. All sides suffered serious casualties. The Portuguese lost 42 men, who were taken into custody by the Chinese along with 2 ships after the violent battle. In Guangzhou, Chinese officials condemned the prisoners to death, and the remaining Portuguese were put to death on September 23, 1523. The Chinese gained war booty in the form of Portuguese cannons and displayed them at the imperial court. The Chinese then reverse-engineered the Portuguese cannons, building their own copies and using them. The cannon were named Thuringais by the Chinese. The Portuguese cannons captured by the Chinese were breech-loading swivel guns. Hiru, who had recruited Yang San and Dai Ming to successfully covertly obtain artillery-making secrets from the Portuguese, was elevated to higher rank after the battle, and was put in charge of manufacturing breech-loading artillery that was reverse-engineered from captured Portuguese cannons, and which replaced the existing Chinese cannons. Only 3 Portuguese ships returned from the battle. Another battle occurred in 1523 at Xicaowan, when the Chinese again defeated the Portuguese. Xicaowan, an alternate spelling for Zisao. Hengcha Island is located to the south of Tunman. Zisao Bay is located to the south of Zhuhai City's Sanzhou Island. The Malay ambassador to China was fearful for his life, so he refused to deliver the message to the Portuguese lest he be killed by them. The Chinese did not even know if the Malay Sultan was alive, so they sent a junk to track him down. It found him, and the Malay Sultan sent a message requesting assistance from the Chinese since the Malays were under Portuguese attack. In 1524 the Chinese sent the Malay ambassadors Tuan Muhammad and Kojak to send the message to the Portuguese. They got lost at sea. The Chinese forced Perez to write letters for them, demanding that the Portuguese restore the deposed Malaccan Sultan back onto his throne. The Malay ambassador to China was to deliver the letter. The Chinese had sent a message to the deposed Sultan of Malacca concerning the fate of the Portuguese embassy, which the Chinese held prisoner. When they received his reply, the Chinese officials then proceeded to execute the Portuguese embassy, slicing their bodies into multiple pieces. The Portuguese had their genitalia cut off and inserted into their oral cavities by the Chinese. The Portuguese were executed in public in multiple areas in Guangzhou, deliberately by the Chinese in order to show that the Portuguese were insignificant in the eyes of the Chinese. When more Portuguese ships landed and were seized by the Chinese then executed them as well, cutting off the genitalia and beheading the bodies and forcing their fellow Portuguese to wear the body parts, while the Chinese celebrated with music. The genitalia and heads were displayed strung up for display in public, after which they were discarded. The Portuguese Jorge de Albuquerque requested immediate assistance from the King of Portugal on January 1, 1524, for him to send the Captain Major, because he feared that the Chinese would come to retake Malacca and punish the Portuguese for destroying the Sultanate. The Chinese built several new massive naval fleets of war junks to prepare for new Portuguese invasions. However, the attacks did not happen, and the fleet was left to decay, the entire fleet disappearing by 1528. Over the decades, as hostilities began to wane, the Portuguese were finally allowed to establish a trade colony at Macau in 1557. Following assistance given to Ming China to expel Wokou Japanese pirates from China's southern shores, the Malay Sultanate of Johor also improved relations with the Portuguese and fought alongside them against the Aceh Sultanate.